So I'm Trish from Step Transformation, and I've structured today's masterclass in three focus areas. So we're first going to explore interactively where business stresses and pressures really sit in ourselves as business owners and as entrepreneurs, and what stress actually does to our brains and our nervous systems. And then I'm going to introduce you to a new concept that Step Transformation has developed based on our deep understanding and working with entrepreneurs and business leaders to grow their leadership and their businesses through neuroscience-based coaching. And this is the concept of what we call the neuro-aligned leader. And my wish for all of you is that you walk away from today with a deeper understanding of human performance from the perspective of a neuro-aligned leader and how that will elevate and influence your business growth. So this may be a picture that some of you feel sometimes more often than we'd like to admit. Many businesses struggle, and it's not because as business owners we lack intelligence or ambition or even technical ability, but it's because as leaders our internal systems become overloaded. And so we experience the constant stress and pressure in different forms, and we'll touch on that throughout the masterclass. But there's mental overload, there's that overthinking, there's emotional reactions. We are often not the best version of ourselves when we are under stress and pressure. We become exhausted. We have difficulty switching off. We have decision fatigue. What's that? That's when we have a number of decisions that we need to make, and we don't make them because there's cognitive overload or just our resilience that is depleted. That's what decision fatigue is. And what often happens is it frustrates our teams because when we delay making decisions, it also slows them down. So most entrepreneurs think that we have a business problem. We actually have a nervous system overload problem. And I want to start today's session with a poll that I'd like Almarie to put up on the screen. And I want to invite each of you to answer 5 questions. So Almarie, would you put the poll up for everyone to engage interactively with these 5 questions? So the first question, I experience regular stress and pressure in my business. Would you strongly agree? Agree? Don't know? All right. Okay. So almost the full room has identified that you either strongly agree or agree that you experience regular stress and pressure in your business. And we're going to be talking to that and what stress looks like and what it does to the brain and nervous system. And then we're going to move over to how we can reshape and rewire and be more intentional at bringing ourselves online without taking it on. I'd like us to move over to the next question. So a lot of the room, in fact, almost 3/4 of the room, the virtual room, are finding that it's difficult switching off, difficult shifting the brain, disconnecting from work and being fully present in these other pockets of time where you would love to live life more fully. Let's move on to the third question. And again, this is about 2/3 of the room who are agreeing that at this point in time, you're more reactive than you should be. And that's what stress and pressure does. We are not the best version of ourselves under stress and pressure unless we become more intentional. So we'll talk to that. Let's go over to the fourth question. Okay. All right. So I love to call this the body battery. And when we start looking at the neuro-aligned leader, we call it neuro-resilience. So that's when we notice that we are depleting in our bodies, that we're starting to become physically exhausted. The cognitive, the emotional, the body, that body battery just is going below what it should be. Thanks for that. And the fifth question, I experience decision fatigue. Remember there's so much happening that you're stalling and making decisions, and that does slow your team down. Who's experiencing decision fatigue? And often we are working on automatic, or we're living and breathing on automatic. We don't even notice. And that's how the brains are designed, that our brains push as much as it can into an automatic pattern. And we're going to be touching on some of this today. So do you notice how many of us take on daily stress in our minds and thoughts, in our heart, our emotions, in our bodies, and our brains and nervous systems take on the stress and pressure? And when this happens, we move into survival mode, meaning we aren't failing as a leader, we just aren't operating entirely to our fullest potential. Okay, so I'm curious whether some of you resonate with these pictures. So as entrepreneurs and small business owners, we live inside uncertainty. Unlike being an employee in a large corporate or even a leader in a large corporate, with small businesses, there's little margin for error. Our mistakes feel personal. Our cash flow pressure is real, and there is constant financial uncertainty for some of us. And as business owners, we often carry multiple roles simultaneously. There's the operational pressure. On top of that, there's responsibility for our own families. And then, of course, for the families of the staff that we employ. They also depend on us for their survival. And as entrepreneurs, we carry the weight of this business, and there's really cognitive or emotional decompression. That safe space to talk to someone about the chronic stress, the overwhelm, the challenges, the cognitive overload. And what happens in the situation is that chronic stress builds into cognitive overload, emotional overload, physical overload, and we move into what I like to call reactive leadership. I don't know if some of you have seen this before, but I always like to bring up the term exhausted-whelmulated. What's that? I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, and I'm stimulated or overstimulated all at once. It's just exhausted-whelmulated. So perhaps some of you know this, and perhaps some of you don't. Our brains are linked to our heart and our gut through the vagus nerve. So we are intrinsically linked as human beings. So leadership is neurophysiological before it is strategic. And what that means is the brain and nervous system respond, and this influences how we as leaders are showing up to ourselves, but also showing up to our team members and those around us. So as business owners, many of us unknowingly remain in prolonged survival states. What am I saying by survival states? Do you know that our brains are built, they developed for survival, not for balance, not for joy. Our brains are built for survival. So we move into patterns that we automatically execute those habits without even thinking around whether those patterns still serve us and our teams today or not. So in survival mode, the brain prioritizes threat detection. It's what it does. And this means that this prefrontal cortex goes offline. This is responsible for thinking. So in survival mode, your stress narrows and you become less creative. That long-term thinking and planning, that becomes inhibited, and that becomes replaced with short-term survival processing. This nervous system remains activated and in protection mode. So some of you may have heard of these particular patterns of fight, or flee, or freeze, or fawn. These are our automatic patterns, and each one of us may have different patterns that our brains and nervous systems move into for self-protection. I'll give you an example of mine. Sometimes when I move into business overwhelm or a challenge, I will move into absorbing myself in my work. And that sometimes doesn't serve my teams. I need to be able to show up and be fully present, making the decisions. So behaviors also become more reactive. You'll notice that under stress, patience decreases. We become irritable. The decisions we make can be based on those emotions and more reactive, rather than using a decision framework to ensure that our decision making is such that it serves us in our business. Our relationships could suffer. You may even notice that your teams begin to absorb your stress as a leader of the business. And this is often seen in their behaviors, sometimes mirroring your behaviors, and at other times moving into their protection modes, their survival modes of fight or flight or freeze or fawn. Under prolonged pressure, these automated patterns create what we call functional burnout. And this is when, as entrepreneurs and business owners, we still perform externally, but internally we become exhausted. It shows up as irritability, mental fatigue, overthinking, emotional withdrawal, reduced creativity, increased conflict. Perhaps sometimes we're the leader that blames, avoidance, poor sleep, loss of meaning. Who's familiar with feeling like you're running at 180 kilometers an hour, but it feels like you're still not going anywhere? So I want to talk briefly around the entrepreneur stress loop. We experience pressure, we work, and then we reach fatigue, and this moves into reactive decision making, which causes more pressure, and so the stress loop continues. And as business owners, we begin to believe, I need to hold everything together. Nobody can do it like I can. I cannot slow down. If I stop, things fall apart. And eventually, the nervous system loses its recovery capacity. The body remains activated continuously in this survival mode. The decision fatigue increases. Relationships suffer, motivation declines. And this is where burnout begins. But importantly, burnout is not simply working too hard. Burnout is this prolonged stress without recovery, without meaning, without regulation, and without support. So just the last slide on the stress and how we show up as leaders and how it affects our businesses. So neuroscience shows that human beings absorb emotional states from one another. And I'm curious, please share in the chat box, who of you can feel someone's energy almost instantly when they enter into your space or into a room? We feel the invisible. And teams often mirror the emotional condition of us as leaders. So if as a leader, we are highly reactive, fear-driven, emotionally unavailable, constantly stressed, possibly even blaming staff for situations, the business environment absorbs that energy. And conversely, when we are leading in calm, we are regulated in ourselves, we're grounded as leaders, We create what I like to call a psychologically safe space for ourselves, but also a psychologically safe thinking space for the others in our team. That sense of calm under pressure, that better communication, that clearer thinking, a thinking space for self and the team to be able to ask questions in a safe environment. That's improved trust that grows in that sort of environment, better collaboration. So leadership is not only strategic influence, and this is particularly important in small businesses where proximity and emotional transfer are high. So now that we've spoken about stresses, the everyday reality, in the poll, we've identified that we take on the stress and pressure. What is this concept of a neuro-aligned leader? So I want to share with you, and as part of my sharing, I'd like to invite you to just notice what happens within yourself. Notice from a broader lens of what I'm sharing with you today. Notice the power of being intentional through your noticing. So what is a neuro-aligned leader? A leader whose thinking, whose nervous system, whose purpose, relationships, and decision-making are aligned with sustainable business growth. And you're going to see on the screen 7 dimensions of any leader. These dimensions have been identified through a process of thousands of hours of coaching entrepreneurs and executives in neuroscience-based coaching that is aligned to that small logo that's on the right-hand bottom of the screen. So that is, as a business, we're aligned with international coaching federations, the code of ethics, the core competencies of coaching. And what we've worked with is the thousands of hours of shifting business owners and leaders aligned to the core competencies of the International Coaching Federation. We've pulled our neuroscience understanding leadership models together, piloted, and we've created a particular assessment called the Neurosignature Assessment. And it is underpinned by these 7 dimensions of any leader. So I want to talk to these dimensions. We've put neuroscience into everyday understandable language. So when we talk about energy and stress resilience, this is not about going, doing the all-nighters, continuing until you fall off the cliff and you burn out. Energy and stress resilience is about the capacity to maintain emotional balance, to recover from any setbacks, and to sustain this performance under stress and pressure. Let's go to focus and decision agility. So that's about the ability to adapt thinking patterns, embracing the complexity that comes our way as business owners, and generating creative solutions. So it's the ability to keep the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, online with managing how we deal with stress and pressure. The third dimension, values and purpose alignment. So that's the alignment of actions with our core values, the values that we live and breathe that keep us in inner harmony, and the ability to inspire others through our meaningful, consistent vision. The fourth dimension is mindset and growth capacity. Have you come across those people who know it all, who you can't teach anything to? It's their way or the highway. So mindset and growth capacity is on the other end of the continuum. It's the mindset of continuous learning, seeking feedback, and embracing challenges as opportunities. The fifth dimension is relational intelligence. And this is the skill in building these meaningful connections, understanding others, and also navigating social dynamics. The sixth dimension, ethical decision making. We've actually aligned this to Ubuntu principles and King 4. Ethical decision making is the commitment to principled choices, integrity under pressure, and transparent accountability. And lastly, attention and perspective. So I often like to use the concept of horse blinkers. This is around the capacity to focus deliberately, to manage distractions, and to sustain concentration on priorities. So these dimensions influence our leadership presence, our own inner well-being, our performance as leaders, influencing the psychologically safe environments for our team members, and creating a healthy organizational culture with a team that thrives and performs. And it also creates a space where, when all of our systems are aligned and functional, fully functional, it creates a space for that innovation that we're looking for as business owners. And that's what we call neuro-aligned leadership. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Feel free to move into the chat box. To what extent do you think that you are a neuro-aligned leader? Now, this is high level. Our assessment actually looks at 77 questions, specific validity and reliability built into that. But this will give you a sense of where you're sitting right now. So the first question I want to ask is, how do you regulate pressure and recover? Do you overload yourself, continue going until you feel that you are depleted, that body battery is lower than what it should be? Or do you prioritize your nervous system regulation? Do you notice when you're starting to feel tired? Have you built in those stress reduction or those reset routines, that thinking space in your calendar, the walk around the block, when you realize that you are not being productive and you need a little bit of time out to get this, the system of yours back online? Are you in a space where you are able to restore your resilience so that you are showing up to that 20% variance in your day, to the knock on the door with something coming your way that you didn't anticipate, showing up to your family at the end of the day? That's what neuro-resilience is about. That's a reflection on the first question that I asked you. What about the second question? Can you prioritize clearly and adapt effectively in complexity? How do you make decisions? So are you in a situation where you struggle to focus or adapt when priorities shift rapidly? Do you find that you are overthinking? Or do you have some sort of a structured decision-making framework where you are stepping back, resetting, reducing cognitive overload, possibly delegating tasks, that you're not taking on everything, that you're using focus tools to be able to be productive in the pockets of times that you've set for yourself? That sits with high-level thinking around what the second question is about, and we call that cognitive agility. Let's move on to the third question. It touches on purpose alignment. So, is your purpose visible, but perhaps not always consistently applied? So, for example, you may value pleasing others. So sometimes you make decisions based on external pressures rather than your intrinsic values, keeping aligned with yourself. This is where boundaries come in. Or do you perhaps live out fully aligned to your core values? Just take a moment to reflect on that question and feel free to sit with that and notice where you're at. Let's touch on the next question. And this is growth and motivation. It's that particular dimension. So, do you as a leader remain teachable and motivated to grow? Where are you in that regard? Here's another element. Are you relying on external recognition? Sometimes perhaps you're hesitant to step outside of your comfort zone. Or do you rely on intrinsic motivators? Motivation within yourself. And you're able to normalize these stretch experiences, I like to call them, stepping out of your comfort zone into the uncomfortable conversations, for example. That's also links beautifully to growth and motivation. Okay, let's talk about psychological safety. To what extent do you build psychological safety for yourself, trust, influence, and collaboration with your team? Do you notice your teams are somewhat disengaged, experiencing perhaps conflict? Is there high turnover in your business? Or are you able to hold that space of empathy, listening, understanding, allowing not only your voice to be heard and valued, but also your team members, active listening, conflict resolution. And then the last question touches on the last domain, which I call attentional sensitivity. And we've noticed that this is where, as humans, a lot of us seem to struggle. So how do you process risk? Do you notice that you're very sensitive to criticism? It's almost like the horse blinkers are on and you're personalizing what comes your way. I often use fingers to describe this. So are you taking on elements of what people say as your own? Or are you able to work with that negative fact and ask yourself a question, what else might be a reality? So balancing positive and negative that's coming your way to be able to see greater opportunities and make decision making, considering a whole lot of elements in the environment. So we call that structured reframing, with shifting attentional bias. Often as humans, one negative can hold us quite strongly, and it takes 5 positives to neutralize that. So without the brain and nervous system working on automatic, what are the other realities that could be a possibility for us to be able to make decisions? So these 7 dimensions, these systems, when they are aligned, leadership feels effortless. It feels easier. You're showing up to yourself in a neuro-aligned functional way, and you're showing up to those around you. But when they're misaligned, things become harder, and you'll feel it cognitively or emotionally or physically. We all have different strengths, growth areas, and leadership risks when it comes to being a neuro-aligned leader. In my many instances of holding a space for a neuro signature assessment experience for business owners, most of us have room for growth. There's been 2 people that I've come across, only 2, that have been neuro-aligned leaders. I think there's such a power in telling a story, and this is a moment that I want to share a story with you around Joe. And Joe is his pseudonym. But I'd like to share with you a story around Joe. So just setting the scene, when Joe started a step transformation journey, he was working 24/7. There was no work-life balance. His day managed him. He was a poor planner. He really struggled with planning. He lived in this cognitive overload, overthinking, consumed in thoughts. His health had taken a knock. He was borderline diabetes. Um, there were some foot issues in the first 3 months of coaching that he was working with, because he was really struggling even just to move. Didn't have time for exercise, poor eating plans, stuck in the rut, that hamster wheel that I shared on one of the earlier screens. And his business was suffering. He wasn't making covering those monthly expenses, meeting those monthly needs. And he had a team, and he had families that he had to support in addition to his own. So we started off Joe's journey with a goals wheel session, goals setting session. And that helped Joe to walk out with a wheel that reconnected him with all the things in life that were important to him. And so he then identified and prioritized from that wheel some coaching goals to start with, to work towards being more fully alive. His first goal was I'm healthy and living life in balance. Why I state that in a positive present tense is because the brain thrives with living and breathing positive present tense. So we bring dreams into goals that have a clear deadline and measures in place to measure those goals. And that was Joe's first goal. The second one was I have a growing business. So some of the work that we actually had to do to begin with was Joe's mindset. He had hindering beliefs, and in fact moving into identity around himself and what he's capable of, a lot of self-doubt. And we had to make that shift, working in a neuroscience space, to reshape and rewire his brain and nervous system to hold onto a positive mindset. There's where his self-belief grew, where his confidence grew, and where he was able to broaden the blinkers from a leadership risk area in terms of attentional sensitivity into a strength where he now approaches a very balanced view of his opportunities and the opportunities for his business. We identified, and Joe worked quite closely with his ideal day and week. So that was time management, shifting to early mornings, meditation, walking to work, eating healthy, refinding his energy. That was really behind his health goal as well, as finding that energy and inspiration in his everyday. And then planning came on, planning and structuring his days and weeks at work. The Monday Connect sessions with his team, where he was showing up more consistently, checking in how the team are doing, planning the week, refining the systems and processes in the workplace, in the business. We then moved into financial planning, and that financial planning session, in fact, is one of the memories that I hold of Joe's journey, because we explored nearly different income streams in his different departments, and he had a tremendous insight that actually shifted his business and allowed his openness to himself in moving into new goals, like having 100 forklifts in his fleet, as an example. And he's now moving towards that. So opening opportunities into realizing not only are the targets that he's setting for himself across his different departments quite achievable, he was starting to work with his team to achieve that, starting to create new strategies. So these are just some examples of the shifts that Joe made in becoming a neuro-aligned leader. What I can share is that Joe now lives in balance. He is being intentional. We talk about presence and we talk about being fully present. So some of us may be at home with our families, but we're not fully present because our minds are occupied and elsewhere. So Joe is intentional now, really living connectedness in his home and in his work. I remember one of the sessions he arrived late at, he sent a video of his daughter because he had a later goal around, I'm a good present father. And she was doing a speech, whether it was a nice Stedford, whatever the case was, and that was delayed. So he landed up coming late into coaching. But I knew that he was holding that space for being fully present to his daughter at that time. Joe maintains his neuro-resilience. He notices when his body battery depletes. And in fact, sometimes in coaching sessions, we hold that space. How do you reset if you're feeling depleted? The other day, one of my clients actually took a few days off after a session of noticing that he's too depleted. And now he's back online. It truly has served him, and it served him in many ways, also reconnecting with family. With growing a business, life gets busy, doesn't it? Joe is psychologically safe, and his business has grown fourfold in terms of monthly revenue. So that's a case study around Joe, and I think it's powerful sharing beautiful stories, because these are the stories of business owners who become aligned with themselves, who realize that it's not about continuing on the hamster wheel. It's about taking one step back, stepping off, looking at the bigger picture, finding that clarity and direction once again, and then driving towards that. And sometimes as business owners, yes, life can be lonely because we don't have the sort of feedback that we used to have under someone's wing when we were writing that report. Our feedback comes in different ways. And that's why there's this power in neuroscience coaching and a space being held as you move towards reaching your goals.
Trish, we have a question.
Fantastic.
A few people actually mentioned it earlier. How do we make that mind shift change from being driven and having to do everything and being all things to all men, and then move? Because the moment we take the foot off the gas, then maybe we're going to miss out, or we're going to drop the ball, or something bad's going to happen. We are in such a mindset of performing and showing up and doing everything. If I stop now, what if I lose out on something, or what if something goes wrong? How do we make that change?
Okay, thank you for the question. So let's talk to the hamster wheel. We're sometimes so our mind, our brains, and our nervous system often keep us safe in this hamster wheel, carrying on to our detriment. So mindset and mind shift change comes in different forms, but an absolute key, and I'll bring it into the last slide, is there is such a power in pausing and reflecting. Because remember, with stress and pressure, our attention narrows, our creativity narrows, our cognitive ability narrows. So we become stuck in a particular rut. That pause and reflect, and often in a space where either you're asking yourself powerful questions or you have an accountability partner asking you powerful questions with no judgment, with no direction. You've got the answers within yourself to be able to make a shift. I'd like to use an example, an analogy. So most of us are familiar with driving a manual, even though most cars are going to automatic. How many gears do we have in a manual? Well, some of us might even have the luxury of 6 or 7, but the reality is there's different gears in a manual. You cannot stay in the same gear. You have to shift gears. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn out your engine. So I hope that gives a little bit of a taste, and I've got five suggestions for you to walk away with and sit with as part of the last slide. Are there any more questions though at this point in time? Sitting with, I'm stuck. What do I do?
No, I think that was that. Thanks, Trish. We
Okay,
can.
thank you. So we can acknowledge we live under tremendous stress and pressure daily as business owners. The reality is this business environment is fast moving, it's uncertain, it's emotionally demanding, it's highly complex, and technical skills alone no longer are enough. So the future really belongs to neuro-aligned leaders. And I see this through coaching journeys with executives and business owners, that we thrive when we can regulate our thoughts and emotions under stress and pressure, when we can think clearly and strategically in complexity, when we adapt quickly to change, when we are able to sustain our energy and performance without burning out, when we're able to trust and move trust. In fact, trust is a common theme that comes into coaching. How do I let go and trust my team? But trust also allows us as business owners to allow our team members an opportunity to take ownership and become accountable. And of course, there's a fine balance, and there's almost a dance along the way for them to be able to dance on their own. And trust is also fundamental in growing a healthy organizational culture. But the other power of being neuro-aligned is being able to lead ourselves as leaders alongside leading others effectively. Okay, I quickly want to touch on the neuro signature assessment. This is an assessment that is different to a lot of the assessments that are out there. So I've got a master's in psychology from many years back. And in psychology, the last 40 years of developing batteries and assessments has been about, we want people to come out with the same results time and time again. The neurosignature assessment is intended to unbox. So it allows you a baseline. It is not a personality test or a label or a psychometric profile. Instead, it grows a deep awareness of insights that you may already have, those shadows you may already be familiar with, but it allows you to put words to that, to understand deeply where you are at in terms of your neuro-resilience or your attentional sensitivity, all those 7 dimensions. And then it allows you the opportunity of making a choice. Which of these do I need to work with to bring me back into alignment so that I can move towards becoming more neuro-aligned? So it really is a baseline to self-directed growth, with the intention that when you come back in 6 or 12 months' time, that you are coming back, doing the assessments, and you've moved from leadership risk or leadership growth areas to strengths, demonstrating that you have become more neuro-aligned. But you will see it naturally in how you are showing up to yourself and how you show up to those teams around you. So the neurosignature assessment asks, how is your nervous system currently regulating under stress and pressure with these 7 domains? Where is your attention drawn? Where may you need to re-energize or reshift focus? I talk about the lens, the blinkers that a horse wears, taking those off. How accessible is clarity to you? We all want clarity and direction. Where is my purpose? How clear are my boundaries in terms of the values that I'm living out that serve me and my business? And what are those patterns that I want to be more intentional at rewiring and reshaping? Why? because we believe that every human being and our human ecosystems have the capability to reshape and rewire to become everything that we are destined to be. Okay, just before I close and share the five takeaways that you could work with immediately. So as a business, and this particular neuro signature, I love the way that somebody else who's done and works with other assessments, he said to me the other day, you know what, Trish, I know my Clifton strengths, and I'm familiar with these different assessments and how I apply them in my business place, but the neuro signature has given me an understanding of my leadership blind spots. So we work with leadership blind spots. We help business owners and entrepreneurs to become neuro-aligned leaders through journeys. We also do deep discovery journeys, like 3 45-minute sessions that target supports for stress and overwhelm, and working with particular well-being or particular goals that you quickly need to work with, and challenges. And then we also do community initiatives. At the moment, we're running a women's well-being series of mini retreats at the last Saturday of every month. But if you want to explore us, go and visit our website. You're welcome to pop me an email directly. If you've got any particular questions, you can book a call. You'll see I've circled it through book a call on our website. There's more information around the neuro signature and around the various journeys that we do. Pausing there, I want to ask the question before we move into the 5 practical daily shifts. As we start to close on today, I'd like you to just reflect what part of your leadership currently feels misaligned. What is your body trying to tell you as you shift back and notice? What currently creates the most stress in your business? Where are you operating reactively instead of intentionally? And I'm more than happy to share these slides with you over email so that you can sit a little bit longer with some of these questions. The question that I'd like to open to the floor is, what new insights or learnings do you have around leadership, around you as a business owner, that you're walking away from today with? So a couple of takeaways that may serve you. Pause before reacting. So create that space between that stimulus, especially if you realize that you struggle with emotional triggers, and that response. In fact, when I grounded a goal for myself a couple of years back, I called my goal rising above my emotional triggers. And I actually drew myself sitting in a cross-legged position in that meditation, that like the meditation monkey on a high pillar. And that was my everyday reminder of pausing and responding rather than reacting. Protect your recovery. So recovery is performance, and we speak about sleep being the magical workplace. Sleep, movement, emotional decompression, all of these things matter. And it could be making sure that you have that walk out in nature around the block every day. All of us will find our own ways to create that lightness, that recovery that serves us. It might mean if your calendar is booked back to back, where have you got a different color for your resets? Prioritize clarity over busyness. So urgency, if you're finding that everything moves into an urgent department, just reassess. How do you move away from urgency? The 4th one, build emotional awareness. So notice this body of yours has great power. It's talking to you. Listen to it. Connect mind with heart and gut, because 65% of the heart is made up of the same neurons as the brain. So if you're ignoring what's happening here, you're in fact missing out on a couple of opportunities or warning signs. And then fifthly, reconnect with your purpose daily. Every human being strives as one of our three major pillars in life: purpose and meaning. And purpose stabilizes pressure. So remember that shifts happen in small incremental steps. What's that 1% extra that I'm doing today to serve myself, bringing myself online? And the next day, what's that 1% extra? And so you will start moving in the direction that you know is going to serve you, in a direction that, and I like to use the analogy of a caterpillar. A lot of us walk up and down ladders over each other. When we notice that there's something more, it's around like a caterpillar stepping into a cocoon where some transformation is happening. If you can't do it on your own, we're here to help you in a cocoon space with neuroscience coaching, because you want to dissolve some of what doesn't serve you, and you want to create this new identity to become a butterfly, a producer, a pollinator from a consumer. And I'd like to end with that note. Thank you so much for taking the time to be present in the masterclass.